So you've got a couple of guys, Mark, that we've talked about a lot here. DJ Hicks and Peyton Bowen are guys that are going to be in town. The the Peyton Bowen saga, again, I think you just flip a coin at this point. I have no idea. He's very pro Oklahoma. He's I think he's got a lot of interest from Oregon as well. Um, and outside of where he's at with Notre Dame, I think the one thing that's interesting, Mark, as you talk about some of these recruits that Oklahoma's in on, Peyton Bowen, his brother Eli Bowen, DJ Hicks, some other guys that what's the Texas A&M situation look like from a recruit's perspective? That they are, I mean, I think it's safe to say that they're in a worse position than Oklahoma has been this year, given the fact that I think what 3-7, 3-8 right
Yeah.
now, um, and they've just completely gone downhill, and there's certainly questions about Jimbo Fisher's future there, and so I think if there's not an opportunity for Oklahoma or other teams to leverage that information, or leverage that situation, now would be the time. Although Oklahoma doesn't have a ton of room to kind of leverage that, but still, if they can get there. So Peyton Bowen is a guy that, again, we'll see how that goes. He's been on campus a ton. I think there's different things to consider, with Peyton Bowen. I think if I remember right, I think his girlfriend just signed with Oklahoma, from a softball perspective, if I'm right, or softball or soccer. I'm trying to recall which sport she plays, but she just signed. But I think he's got a situation where he may want to play with his brother at Oregon if that ends up being a situation. But also, I think he's still very much in the loop with Notre Dame and could be a guy for Texas A&M as well. So, those are the two main guys. There's a 2024 guy, David Stone. Again, that's been pretty heavy, Oklahoma, but we'll see how that continues to go. But I think one thing that's interesting here, we've got, looking at the Big 12 schedule, you've got Iowa State hosts Texas Tech this weekend with, I think they're favored by 3.5 points. They've got an opportunity to win that game. And if Oklahoma doesn't win one of these two last games, they will be tied for last in the Big 12. So whatever, I mean, I think that's certainly something that no one could have ever predicted, or no one ever thought could potentially happen. But that's the situation that they could potentially be in. So I think this is the game, probably above Texas Tech, that Oklahoma has a better chance of winning, with it being at home, and all of the potential excitement with having some of the big time recruits on campus, and being a night game and all that good stuff.
If I'm looking at Texas A&M and I'm a recruit, unless there's NIL money involved that I just can't turn down, that supersedes everybody else by just an incredible amount, I just can't have any kind of faith or trust in what's going on there. It's one thing to say Brent Venables' first year, Jimbo
Right.
Fisher fifth year, and he's having his worst year, and they're getting saved by a UMass game this weekend. Otherwise, they just lose to everybody. And their win totals this year, let's assume they lose to LSU the last weekend of the season. Who they beat? They beat like Miami, Sam Houston State, Kent, and UMass. They beat like three complete flyweights in Miami, who's in as much disarray as they are.
Right.
Just awful. I would just question, okay, they got a fancy facilities and a great stadium and all this money, and they recruit all these 5-stars, but do they know what they're doing? I can go somewhere else. There are schools that have everything that they have, but they seem to know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's well, especially with the fact that they had I think sometimes it takes a little bit longer for freshmen to obviously to get there, but they had the best recruiting class
Yeah.
in the history of the uh, in the history of 247, right?
Yep.
So, and the fact that they're still having this kind of season, the expectations have got to be much higher for a team that's. I can't remember who they finished with. Maybe LSU. Did they
LSU.
finish with LSU? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're potentially, staring at a 4-8 season right now with, as you mentioned, UMass, which is another flyover. But with LSU, but still, yeah, it's got to be. It's a much different situation, I think, as you mentioned. I completely agree, wholeheartedly agree with Brent Venables in his first year, uh, opposed to Jimbo Fisher in his fifth year. And I've seen the graphics have been, Jimbo Fisher's not even been as successful as Kevin Sumlin has within his tenure at Texas A&M. So, but the buyout is astronomical.
Yeah.
I can't remember the dollar amount, but it's
Around
very, very
85
big.
million.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was in the 80s, but yeah, that's astronomical. So I don't know. I mean, they may. I mean, some of these teams are willing to bite the bullet. Look what Nebraska did this year. They had a significant savings if they would have waited a couple of weeks for Scott
Yeah.
Frost, and they didn't. So
Oh,
um, it may be worth it. I mean, if they think a 4-8 season with this roster is completely unacceptable, that could be something they're willing to do.
Auburn pulled the plug on Brian Harsin like a year and a half after they pulled the plug on Gus Malzahn, and Gus Malzahn was like in the $23 million range, and then Harsin, I don't know what his would have been, but I'm sure it was 10 or 12
Yeah.
at least, something like that. So they're willing to part with 35 million bucks in a year and a half. So I got to think Texas money, and then the Paul Chryst situation at Wisconsin. And you think of Wisconsin as being a very conservative, buttoned up place. They're winning like 72% of their games with Paul Chryst, but no. And his buyout was 16 million. And as I understand it, they said 11 million. Here you go. One lump sum. Boom. There you go. Maybe a bunch of Texas oil guys will get together and say, okay, Jimbo, it's 85, but we'll give you 60. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Go live the rest of your life. Yeah, I mean, it's a good problem to have if you're Jimbo Fisher. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure he's not losing. I mean, yeah, I mean, he wants to win, right? Of
Yes.
course, he wants to be successful, but at the end of the day, I don't think he's losing any sleep over the potential of getting between $60 and $80 million, regardless of what happens.